Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take some time before I go to work on this Monday to talk about lowriders and the dynamics between regular versus lowriders. So, I have a few minutes. I'm just going to go through some basics. There's things you've got to understand when you decide that you're going to take a stock vehicle and lower it. That even pertains to sports cars that are already lowered from the factory, by the way. Now, there are subtle differences. A passenger car or a two-seater coupe from the factory that is not a lowered vehicle from the factory is going to act significantly different when you lower it. This will include dynamics of wear and tear. With the sports cars, when they're designed lowered from the factory, their wear and tear is significantly different because those parts are specifically designed for that vehicle. And on things like the Camaros and Mustangs, the Corvettes and the Ford GTs, the Porsches, Lamborghinis, they're specific to a vehicle majority of the time. I don't know, Lamborghini might share their suspension systems, but I don't know that for a fact. Majority of cars are designed regular passenger vehicles with common parts. Sports cars are a little bit different in that respect. Like my Lancer, I have a 2009 Lancer. Now I can get aftermarket parts out of the ass since it came out with the new design in 2008. The ones before that even more. I mean, you can build a completely new car out of parts. And I knew that there were certain things before I lowered my Lancer that were going to change because I've had many lowered vehicles. It's a very wide stance that the Lancer has from the factory. It really is a really nice wide car, so it lends itself to handling really well when it's turned into a tuner or a race car. And if it's a dedicated race car, they're pretty badass. But I don't have the all-wheel drive Evo. I have a front-wheel drive with a CVT, which is a constant velocity transmission. It basically has a couple of really thick rubber bands in these cones, and they force themselves out, and it, through whatever expansion and contraction it has is what changes the gear ratio, basically. I know it's more involved than that, but I'm not going to get into it because I don't fucking know it. Anyway, my car was already 7 years old when I decided I was going to finally get components to lower it. It's the first car I've had that I have not altered until a significant time after buying it. Every other one I modified from the start. And I'm noticing a lot of things now. My suspension is very noisy. I have K-Sport street coils, but I have them on the highest compression setting for biasing, for pressure inside the chambers. If I put them all the way to the softest, that might change, but my handling dynamics would change, which I don't want, because I didn't have the money for the Pro or the race sets, which are significantly different. The compression rating on the street set compared to the race set is like almost half. The race set's very hardcore, but you better be racing your car if you're going to drive it with those, because you're going to get jostled all over your car if you drive on the street. The other thing with lowering cars, you already know this if you have a sports car, because they're already lowered. You're going to lose at least 20 to 40% of where you can go and how to get to places, because you're lowered and the curbs and the speed bumps are things that are factors at this point. Okay, now here in Arizona, it is one of the worst effing states for speed bumps, where these effing idiots that make rules decided it was a good idea to put the ridiculous speed bumps that they do. A human being can design their response to speed limits. It doesn't take fucking speed bumps. There's people with enough presence of mind to pay attention to such shit. The problem is there's so many people out there in the world now that don't pay attention to shit because they're idiots and they're self-centered, that they find it necessary, in this state at least, to have them every fucking where. Not to mention that their water system, their sewer system is horrible throughout the valley. So they have these entryways into so many businesses that are like 30-degree angles. I can't get my car anywhere near them. It's stupid, but it's Arizona. Some of the best places, though, California, Florida. Florida's a badass state for lowriders. They gave no fucks when it came to designing their road system because they did what they did and it was done. It's one of the reasons it floods so bad, unfortunately. So here's some of the things I've noticed with my Lancer now. I have a lot of miscellaneous creaks. The dash is starting to come loose. My headliners are always vibrating. I can hear the mounts for my struts, the strut towers flex. I hear everything in that car now. And one of the other things that happens, like with my exhaust, I have a handmade exhaust made by Wade's custom and muffler repair shop here in the valley. He's really talented. But the one thing that didn't happen, and I kind of question why it wasn't done, is to either have the spikes that they made for my rubber dampers to hold the suspension with. They didn't have knobs on these. And you can take a threading device, thread them, and put bolts on them. But bolts are going to rotate off after so long. They just are, no matter how hard you crush them into the end of the thread. So why didn't he take welding material and make balls of them like they have factory hangers with? I don't understand why. I've thought about going back to them because my exhaust rattles so bad I can hear it all the way in the cabin. It comes almost all the way off those rubber things. There's periods of time where I have to crawl under my car, which is not easy because I'm 270 pounds. I have to crawl under my lower vehicle from the back and push these things back on to quiet it down. So I'm probably going to get a redesign of my exhaust. The other thing is my car's so low that, and I have a dragger style exhaust system because of the cross member in the back is low enough to where I have to come under. And even though there's a notch in there from the factory, it's not enough to raise the exhaust pipe from scraping at lower levels. So I have to have somebody notch that even more and then weld in a half-inch piece of GRC, which is really strong steel, and put some type of bumper pad in there and put it back up and put it up higher. I have to, or it's just going to keep rattling. So now I have a repair to make. The exhaust sounds great, but I don't like it, even though it sounds great. It's bulky. There's 2 chamber mufflers on it. Well, not chamber mufflers, straight throughs that are locally made, which is great. They sound great. It just doesn't suit my needs anymore. I found this out after I paid the $600 to get this thing done, which is worth it because it sounds badass. But I can have a better sounding one that fits better. So when I do that, I'm going to another muffler company that's way out in fucking Goodyear because they have the muffler I want. And these are considerations you're going to have when you make a lowrider. I didn't take into account the clearance of the muffler because in my previous lower vehicles you didn't have to worry about it. You could route it all the way up to the frame. And that was because I had an S10 and 94 Geo Tracker that were my main lower vehicles. My Geo Tracker was phenomenal. I had that thing on the rails almost. It was so low, and I did it the wrong way. I cut 2 links out of all the coils, heated them, and put them on the car with the factory stock still on, by the way, and let it sink as it was cooling and hardening, which you're not supposed to do. And it took it down like 7 inches. I mean, it was really low. I almost couldn't get into any service bay to get an oil change. I had to go into ones that had the sunken bay, which made things very interesting for me a lot of the times. So it was extremely low, like even half as low as my Lancer is now. But I still got over more shit because the wheelbase was short. So you got to take that into account too. All these little Scions and Minis and those are much easier to drive lowered than the longer wheelbase ones on a factor of getting into and out of places because their shorter wheelbase allows them to get over quicker. I drag almost every time I go over something. I drag my exhaust, and I know it's getting pits everywhere. So you got to be aware of things. You got to be aware that your motor mounts are going to suffer. Your body mounts are going to suffer. These things are going to wear out over time. So if you're going to lower a factory car, please make sure it's as new a vehicle as possible, because down the road when you want to sell it, it's going to be a factor. I know I pretty much can't sell my car outright. It's Blue Book is stupid, and between maintenance costs and paying it off and everything else, I've spent like $35 grand on that car. Now, I get 340 to 360 miles on a 13-gallon tank. Don't get me wrong; it's never overheated the entire time I've had it. But I did a couple things wrong. Even though I've meticulously maintained it, flush-wise, fluids, the whole brakes, everything, I got my axles rebuilt. Bad mistake. Because the one on the right from the start has had noise ever since. And they went to a reputable repair shop that rebuilds axles. So that was like $990. Just to have them rebuilt. It's $1,800 for a factory set from the dealer. I should have paid the $1,800. The twice as much would have guaranteed I had the factory fit axles. I then went aftermarket and got slotted and drilled rotors, front and back, and new pads. They're carbon fiber ceramic. They're noisy as fuck. So you just really got to pay attention to certain things. To quote an old adage of lowriders, yeah, my car drives awesome, but it rides like shit. So I can go into a turn at 40, 45 and not squeak a tire. No problem, all day long. It's, in hindsight, not worth it to me. Now, mine are height adjustable, so I can raise them up and all that. But at this point in time, the damage is already done as far as I'm concerned, so why would I raise it? My car looks badass on the road, even with beat up body panels, it looks badass. And I've had it so long, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. So I'm going to keep it that way until I get a new car. But I have no idea when I'm going to get a new car. And now I'm having issues with rattles all over the fucking place. And I think that the CVT is starting to have issues because while it's during warm-up, which is around 10 minutes between getting in my car, turning it on, and starting to drive, it's very rattly, and it's apparent that something's going on somewhere. I tried telling Big O that my serpentine belt pulleys had been replaced a couple years ago under a recall, which they had. I thought that was where the noise was that was an issue when I was warming up. They said, no, that's normal for your aged car. And I'm like going, that's not normal on any fucking car. But it still doesn't overheat. It still gets like 30 plus miles to the gallon. So to get rid of it, to get a new car now and have a new banknote just doesn't really make sense. But it being a lowrider makes it a hassle every time I pull it out of the driveway. If I'd have had something like a Z71 or a 911 Carrera from the start, it would be easier for me in my own mind because I'd be driving something that was meant to be that way. Now, the Lancers are meant to be that way if they're the Evo. They can be made into the Evo status type thing, but the attachment points and such underneath an Evo are a little bit tougher than stock. And it's an all-wheel drive. So the factory Evo is a half an inch taller ride height-wise than mine is right now. So I've had offers for my car from people that have owned Evos that wanted a side project. One guy offered me $6,000. I should have taken it. He offered that to me in a freaking QT parking lot. Let's get in gas. Hey dude, you want to sell your car? I'll give you $6,000 cash. I should have fucking taken it. So, just things to watch out for. Your braking performance improves naturally because usually when you replace suspension components, struts are notoriously heavy, but they're heavy duty with a reason. That's why they're made like that. The K-Sports I have are spun aluminum, and they're great, and they'll last probably 50, 60,000 miles for needing a rebuild. But they're rough on you, and I have a bad fucking back, and I'm old. It's not like the days when I was strolling around in my 94 tracker, because that thing was way overbuilt. Despite lowering it the wrong way. Oh, by the way, when I did that, I put Tokiko S10 shocks on it. We didn't have chambered shocks designed for those vehicles at the time. We had to jury rig shit around or go to a suspension place and have them meter things out in a certain way. They had to put things together. What ended up with my tracker was the cut and heated coils, Tokiko S10 lowered shocks, which were made for S10s only. I had to get brackets made for that. And then I had leaf springs as well. And I took 2 of the 3 leaves out of those. So this thing was very, very scrapey. It was a soft ride, but a very tight suspension at the same time because of the leaf springs. It was a great balance. That car was an exception to the rule, but then I also had the 4-cylinder that was in it was a Suzuki. It was a Suzuki Sidekick, really. GM Performance had an option where you could get a 2.8 liter head that was chopped down and rewelded, and it had a mounting kit to make it the head for this 4-cylinder. First thing of its kind, and they never advertised it. If you asked and they knew what you were talking about, they would do it for you. And I had that. I had flat top pistons. I had titanium rings and springs, roller rockers. I had upgraded fuel system. I mean, the thing was just doped out, and it was over 200 horsepower in like a 1,600 pound car. My Lancer, by comparison, even with rims that are 27 pounds lighter than stock each, I dropped over 200 pounds alone on my car on it. Even though the struts weigh 3 times as much as the coilovers I got, it's still just over 3,000 pounds. Significantly different animal. Handles great, rides like shit. So just know, be prepared. I know that my motor mounts now are getting cracks. They've told me a big O, so I have to go and get aftermarket ones. Well, they're like $180 fucking dollars, because on my car there's sides and front and backs for the motor mounts. Gee, great. Not like a 350 where you can just drop it in with 2 fucking mounts. No. Gotta have more than 2. So, beware. You're gonna have fun, but you're gonna have repairs. It's gonna happen. If you don't drive out the factory lot with an exotic, you're gonna be repairing your shit because you've modified something that was never really meant to be that way. And if you get suspension, for the love of God, if you want your car lowered and you still want to ride, get fucking air ride. I should have never gotten springs. Get fucking air ride.